you so much for inviting me to come this evening. It's great to see everybody. Some people who I've spoken to a lot on digital, social, and it's always nice to meet people in real life. I'm not sure what kind of knowledge people have collectively. I know some people may have lived experience or clinical experience or maybe something, no knowledge at all. I'm just, do you want to pitch it correctly so that it doesn't go over anyone's head, but it's not, I'm not sort of preaching what you already know. So. Okay, just a few bits I'm going to cover. So what is PND anyway? And then a bit more about what it actually feels like in person from a lived experience, so less of the clinical phrases and more of the actual real life experience. A little bit about where to seek help, which is obviously hugely important because we're having great conversations, but there has to be a service on the end of that conversation, otherwise we're setting people up to fall basically. A little bit about me and my own personal experience, and then how that's led to grow the charity, which is now 7.5 years old and funded by Comic Relief, which is pretty exciting for us in the last year or so. So it's an interesting one because PND as a term gets banded around quite a lot. You've probably seen it, if you don't know about it in your own daily lives, you would have seen it on TV. We're all quite familiar with the phrase postnatal depression, but actually there's a bigger conversation coming to the fore about perinatal mental health. Are you all familiar with that term? No? So basically PND is one aspect of an umbrella, so a hybrid of lots of different severity of conditions. And it can be a little bit dangerous to keep using the term PND because people will fall outside of that will think they're not poorly or they don't know where to seek help. So for me, there's a lot of work to be done both in the wider world and in the clinical world about language and using the right language to help people. There's terms like baby blues that I just find really difficult because where does baby blues begin and end and when does it become something more serious than that? So it'd be really helpful if people use day-to-day language and we all understood what that meant. So some of the things that we come across in our service with the mums and occasionally dads, because we do have some dads who come to see us, it's anti and postnatal anxiety and depression. So it's really important that we start having this conversation when people are pregnant, because actually the perinatal period technically is conception through to 2 years. So the government launched a campaign called 1001 Critical Days, which is about that time period to ensure that everybody along that journey has some access to the right help. And we're already seeing lots of mums who are, coming to us in that antenatal process. It's so helpful because it's all about early intervention. The sooner we have the conversation, the sooner we get them access to help, the less likely they're going to get to the severe end of the scale. And then there's OCD, birth trauma. I had quite a difficult delivery, and that's sometimes quite different from postnatal depression, how it presents. It also has to be treated quite differently. So it's just awareness around these different terms. And postpartum psychosis, which is obviously the more severe end of the spectrum. Some stats for you. You may or may not know that the latest stats tell us that it may affect up to 20% of women. That's a huge proportion of women. That's a fifth of people who have a baby who may or may not experience some form of perinatal mental illness, which is staggering when we look at the gaps that exist in services. So it's really important that we have conversations and we also meet the needs of the people that are going through this experience. So what does it actually feel like? When we set Smile up, it was myself and co-founder Ruth, both mums who'd had quite different experiences of postnatal illness, but we came together with the same passion. We'd both been to our doctors separately and said, where can I go? And the doctor had looked at us blankly and said, sorry, there's nowhere to go. And I just could not understand that because there were 3 breastfeeding support groups in my local area, which is brilliant if you are breastfeeding. But why was there nowhere to go for somebody who was really struggling with their own health in a quite difficult and very vulnerable situation? So when we set up Smile, it's really a service set up by mums for mums, and it's about peer support. So for me, I felt that if I could have had someone who'd been through it, hold my hand, look me in the eye and say, I have been where you have been. It is not a nice place, but you will get through this with the right support. I don't think I would have put as bad as I did. And we also want to use words that are like normal terms, not clinical terms, because people get lost in clinical terms. They don't know what they mean. So we've created stuff. Our website is embarrassingly outdated if you do look at it, but the whole idea behind it is that it uses language that people can relate to. So we'll say things like, thought loops going round and round. Nobody told me that. Part of anxiety was lots of thoughts going round and round and round in my head. A sense of hopelessness when you wake up in the morning. I struggled to sleep personally. I was desperate to sleep, but I couldn't get to sleep, and that just led to constant exhaustion. So these are just a few of the symptoms that you may or may not present with. And I think something that's clear to us is that no one experience is ever the same as another. There are some really common themes, and it's important to acknowledge those themes, but it's also really important to respect that every single person's experience is different. And sometimes you will only have one or two symptoms, or you might have all of those symptoms, or you might have only a couple of them, but you'll think, I struggled personally bonding with my little boy, and that was really hard for me, really difficult, because it's such a taboo subject. And I was quite ignorant. I didn't know that was part of perinatal mental illness. I thought it was just about being really low and not being able to cope. I didn't know it affected the bond with my child. So I think we need to be sort of talking a bit more openly about how does this actually feel to people, in real life. And then the important issue is that, we want to have this conversation. We want to be able to encourage people to be honest and open. And that's going on nationally in all walks of life. It's not just in perinatal mental health, and it's brilliant. But a huge problem we have, and I certainly get all the time, is people approaching us saying, there's nothing in my area, what am I going to do? And not even knowing where to start when it comes to, seeking help, or helping a friend. We'll often get people saying, I've got a friend who's really struggling, I don't know what to say to them, I don't know what to do, can you give me some advice? So we would, as a signposting service, we would say, at the first point, speak to your GP, your health visitor or your midwife, to get a health professional to have that conversation with you. And they technically should point you in the correct direction. Again, it depends on the person. I personally went to a GP when I was quite poorly, and I had a colicky baby who never slept, and he said, just get some sleep. And I just walk out thinking, oh my Lord, I really was quite desperate, and he's telling me to go for a nap. It's not really what I need to hear. And unfortunately, you will get some women and men who will walk away from that point and think that's it, there's nothing wrong with them. And part of the work that we do is sort of advocating for people to go back to the doctor, find another doctor, find somebody else to talk to until you're confident that you're being listened to, and that someone is really taking the time to understand what you're going through. And that's why talking is hugely important. I know you mentioned before, Lee, sometimes it's really good to talk to someone outside of your family unit. A lot of mums will say, Mum just didn't understand, she didn't get it. She had no idea, we just got over and we got on with it. And that's a really unhelpful thing to say to somebody who's going through quite a difficult time. And it's not necessarily their fault, they're just the victim of a generation that didn't talk about mental health issues, unfortunately. But there are people out there, and I don't know if any of you have heard of PND chat, there's lots of Twitter chats going out there that are really, really brilliant communities for mums who are stuck at home, unable to leave the house with a baby. They then feel connected to society, and so someone who will listen and understand to what they're talking about. Obviously, we would love for every single person to have access to a high quality, safe peer support service in their area. Unfortunately, the reality is that doesn't exist at the moment. We've been doing this for 7.5 years, and the landscape has changed dramatically in that time. There's a lot of money coming in from government down, which is brilliant, into statutory services, but we also need this kind of activity from the community upwards, which is where other groups are really great at being vocal and creating that passion and awareness and services in that way. So my dream is that we all talk to each other. We don't just do things on our own. We all have to, we make sure that what we're doing is really joined up. So if you're going to seek help from a GP, very much like traditional anxiety or depression, you're likely to get prescribed or offered antidepressants. Everyone's familiar with antidepressants. We also know there's a little bit of stigma around it, around discussion about it. There are still people who quite rightly have their own opinions about whether they want to take them or not. That's completely an individual decision. But then there's also a weird sense of, I'm not coping if I don't take them. I still have conversations with people regularly who say, I just want to get off the tablets. You think, if you had a heart problem or something else, you wouldn't think, I just want to get off the tablets, would you? You just do what it took to make them feel better. So there's a place for antidepressants. But talk therapy is hugely important. I know Polly and perhaps others in the room who kind of work in that area. The difficulty we have in the NHS is the waiting lists. When I went to be screened, I was told 4 to 6 months before I could speak to somebody. Now, when you're in crisis, that is not what you want to hear. And it seems ludicrous to me that you'll be not only vulnerable yourself, but with a young baby who's vulnerable because of you're vulnerable. But that you should be accelerated to the top of the list because of that. But we live in a world where it's, the system is strained. So as part of the service that we provide at Smile, we have access to counsellors at each of our sites that run in parallel to the group sessions. And we've had mums who could come in within 2 weeks and see somebody. And and then they don't have to wait 6 months to see somebody else. They might not even have to see somebody else. And if they do, they're in a better place because they've had a chance to have a chat and talk about what it is that they're going through. So talk therapy needs to, we need to improve the way that we're offering that service. And then self-care, I know self-care is one of those terms that's probably used a little bit too much and possibly not necessarily in the right context sometimes. There is this weird thing that self-care can be a bit like self-obsession or pampering. It's not necessarily about having a spa break, as much as we love a spa break in our lives. It's about putting yourself first and knowing that you can't pour from an empty cup, particularly when you're looking after young children. One of my big things when I was poorly was I must do everything, for my child, even if I can't sleep, and I must, live on half an hour's sleep just so that he can get through. Well, that's just ridiculous when you think about it, because a healthy mum helps a healthy baby basically. So I learned the hard way with this one. But we do a little book of smiles that everybody has access to in our welcome packs when they come to our groups, and that was basically put together by mums and dads who come through our service who had little tips that they could offer each other on things that helped them through. And the idea was you could put it in your pockets, it's tiny, and if you're having a tough day, you can literally open any page, and you might find something that boosts your mood a little bit and helps you to feel a bit better. And ultimately, when you're in the thick of it, so important to know that you're not alone. It feels like the loneliest journey in the world when you're struggling in the midst of it. And to have somebody, whether physically or virtually, hold your hand through that process is so important. And to also know that it will pass. When I was really poorly, I didn't believe anybody who told me that this wouldn't be my future, because in my head I just kept going around over and over again, everyone's going to be this way, this is how it's going to be for me. But I guess I had to get through it to know that that wasn't going to be the case. So these are my little spruglets. On the left, this picture was taken when my little boy Oscar was about 6 months old. And I can look at that picture and remember how I feel, and it's not a nice thing to look at it in some ways because I was not in a great place, and the smile doesn't reach my eyes, I can see that. And I think I'd had really high expectations of becoming a parent. I thought it was going to be rose-tinted, glorious. I'd had quite a full-on career. I thought this was just going to fit into my life, it was going to be amazing, and it was a bit ridiculous when I think about it. So the reality of having a baby who was colicky for 6 months and didn't sleep and cried pretty much relentlessly was quite tough. And yeah, it was a difficult one. I have been always self-aware, so I kind of saw health really quickly, and I was poorly from probably soon after I had him. I just remember when I delivered him feeling numb, and that was really scary because I'd seen all these films and all these programs about how you fall in love with your baby, and it's the most amazing feeling, and no one can take away that unconditional love, and I felt nothing. And I looked at my husband and he was crying, and I thought, shit, I must be some kind of monster because I don't feel anything right now. And that was trauma. I didn't know that at the time, but I lay there numb, and it never left me. That thought in my head kept thinking, oh my God, there's something wrong with me, I don't love my child, and that just went round and round and round and round my head. And it was only by talking to somebody that I could unpick all that and unpeel it all, and realised, with looking back, because hindsight's a beautiful thing, that the love was always there. It was just buried deep inside lots of layers of fear that I couldn't access. So yeah, it was a tricky journey, and it took me about 9 months to get. I remember to feel joy about being a mum after 9 months. I remember taking him on a first holiday by the seaside and enjoying in the sea and thinking, oh my gosh, I actually quite enjoy this. This is really nice, and holding on to those moments. And they just got more and more and more. I'm really, really lucky that I now have 2 children. When my little boy was 4, we had a conversation about, are we going to do this again? Because I really wanted him to have a sibling, but it was a massive risk to take because I knew that I could get poorly again, and there's a high chance I could get poorly again. But I thought, you know what? We've got Smile Group, it's established. I know a bit more about what I'm doing, I know what to look for, I know to get help early doors, I can be really brave and courageous about this, and if it's bad, I know I can get through it basically. So we did, and Violet is now 3.5, and I had a completely different experience of motherhood the second time round. And it doesn't work that way for everybody, but for me it was hugely healing because I went through it and I thought, this is how it should feel. Oh my God, now I know what people are talking about. But also I was able to go to midwifery appointments, and I'd see the Smile poster on the wall, and I'd be doing my little mystery shop, not so mystery shops. And I felt brave brave enough to say, no, I need support, I need it lined up, I want it beforehand, and to get that ready, and to be, so many mums just feel really vulnerable when they're going through that process that they don't know what to do to ask for help. So I made a point, we still go into our groups quite regularly because we don't actually facilitate it, we pay people to facilitate the groups that come through our service. But I used to take my daughter to the groups, to the mums, and to say, listen, I went through what you went through, and I've come out of it the other end, and I can tell you now you can and will get better. And that really helped people to say, oh my God, there is some hope to hang on to. So, in terms of Smile, Ruth and I came together through our health visiting. We introduced us to each other, and we said, we've just got to do something about this. And we started working out of children's centres because they're great resources, and they've got on-hand facilities for children to play with. They've got specialists on site, so we felt quite protected. So we launched in Macclesfield in 2011, and we just said, as anybody else does who sets up a charity, if I can help just one person, one family, not to go through what I went through on my own, then it is worth doing. And it turns out there's lots of people we can help. I think we had 103 women through our service in the last year alone, and that's only because we started evaluating, and because we have to for Comic Relief, because they fund what we do. That we're starting to see some really interesting numbers and statistics coming through. So a little bit about our model. Now we've got 3 peer support groups across Cheshire East. So they operate out of Macclesfield, Covington and Sandbach. We deliberately set up like a drop-in format because we know that when you have young children, the last thing you want is more pressure to be somewhere by a certain time and to have to stay that long, and it's just too stressful. So we said, come out whenever you want, self-refer into group. You can be referred by a midwife, health visitor or a GP. It's really relaxed, it's really welcoming, it's really non-judgmental, but it's safe, it's got protected by policies, etc., and everything's set up. But it's just someone to make you a cup of tea and sit down with you and just say, oh, how's your day been? Just really everyday conversations that we don't always get to have. So we decided quite early doors to have paid, trained and supported facilitators because we wanted to do it really well, whatever we were going to do. But that raises the bar in terms of money, because you have to have a certain amount of money coming through in order to pay for people to deliver that service. So we've kind of learned a lot along the way about that side of things. One-to-one counsellors on site, and then 18 months ago, maybe a little bit more than that, we were told, we were nudged a little bit by the people saying, you should apply for this. Basically, Comic Relief put out a maternal mental health grant that was quite significant for us. We've been dabbling with like 5,000 here, 2,000 here, just to keep the service going. And it was like, whoa, can we do this? This is scary, but let's just do it. And did a bit of a seat of pants application, and we got an email that went to our junk mail randomly, and my Ruth, who just had a baby, she literally was breastfeeding a baby at 2 in the morning, messaged everybody going, oh my God, we got the money! Like, whoa, it was incredible! So nearly £90,000 from Comic Relief over a 3-year period, which actually, it sounds like a massive thing, and it is in the scheme of things, but it actually really covers our core costs to deliver those 3 services. And we've also launched a one-to-one home visits programme, because there are loads of mums and dads who can't even leave the house to get to a peer support service. So we've now got skilled practitioners going into the homes, doing like 6 to 8 sessions on confidence and well-being and boosting their mood so that they've got pathway to come to group if they want to. We've had to get quite serious about what we do. We were playing at it for a bit, and it is still lots of fun because it has to be for it to work, but we're quite serious about having to evaluate properly, so we're measuring stuff, we're collecting data where it's appropriate, GDPR and all the like, and starting to put figures together, because we know we've got a really compelling case. We know that we're saving the NHS an awful amount of money, because early intervention, quite forward thinking for the NHS, stops all that kind of lower stream stuff that's going on, and it's brilliant that they're investing more in the statutory services, but there's so many women and then falling through the gaps at that early stage because they just don't have access to help, or they just don't recognise what they're going through. So they're the people that we're trying to meet really. And we also developed a couple of years ago family sessions, because my big thing is it's not just about mum and it's not just about dad, it affects everybody, it affects your children, it affects siblings, it affects, and everybody has to understand it for it to work. So Our monthly sessions on the first Saturday of every month are really popular. We get loads of dads coming along, dads get to talk to other dads about the experience, and it just feels really nice. And maybe people who've come through our service who are well again and working might drop back in, so it's like a lovely community that's grown over the years. And we just launched our volunteers programme, and we're just about to appoint full volunteers to cover our different, because actually our groups are almost at capacity, which is a bit scary really, victim of our own success. Just to very loosely go over the best practice stuff, because this is the more boring clinical stuff, but it's actually really important about making a safe peer support group. It's having the policies in place, it's developing this really strong board of trustees. We've got a new chair who's the perinatal lead for the North West, who's a psychiatrist and really well connected, so that's brilliant. Making sure that we provide DVS training and supervision for anybody who comes through our service. We're part of a national partnership, and we won a anti-stigma award just recently for a campaign we did, which was really good to get people talking about perinatal mental health. And then we developed a really simple thing, again a bit of advocacy. We were getting loads of mums coming to groups saying, when I go to the doctor I just don't know what to say, I just struggling to articulate it, I don't really know what I'm allowed to say or what I'm entitled to. So we'd sit down and we'd go through it with them, and then we thought, why don't we just develop like a drop-down list that you can download from the website, fill it out, give it to reception, pass it to the doctor's got all the information they need, you don't even have to speak in the appointment if you don't want to, because it's so scary having to tell someone how you feel when you don't even know how you feel. And that's been used, they quoted it in the House of Commons, which is really exciting, so it's being used in other GP practices across the UK, which is brilliant. A little bit on referrals, which is changing all the time, but predominantly health visitors, some midwife, we're still having those conversations about the antenatal stuff, and then friend and children's centre, just general PR and social media stuff. I guess you'll all probably be familiar with why people wouldn't be accessing help, because the number one fear is they'll take my baby away from me. We hear that all the time. I thought that. I've got people who work in health who thought that, who knew that that rationally wasn't going to happen, but it's your number one fear, so we have to overcome that, because actually that's a tiny percentage of cases where that will happen, where it's very extreme safeguarding issues going on. I'm not a good parent, I feel like I'm not good enough, so I can't ask for that help, because why do I deserve that help? We actually had a woman came to us whose son was 2, and when she came in the room, she kind of went, and then she cried, and we were like, oh God, are you all right? And she said, oh my goodness, I've been waiting for this for so long. I went to my doctor and he told me not to come because it would be really depressing. I'm like, really? Has your doctor even been here? Do they understand anything about it? So we've got to get over this idea that it's people sitting in a grey room in a circle talking about their experiences, because it isn't. We talk about Love Island and random stuff, and it's mainly quite an upbeat environment, even though some people can get upset if they want to. But we still have people who are lying on the Edinburgh test. That's the score that you do at 6 weeks when you've had a baby, where you talk about your mood, and so many people will change that because they don't want to be perceived as struggling. My health visitor said to both me and Ruth, you guys haven't got postnatal depression. So just because we present as quite confident people, you've just got to be really careful about making sweeping statements like that. And then we collect testimonials, voluntary kind of stuff. We have people just give us lovely feedback. We do video testimonials because of the stuff we do with Comic Relief, and it's just so powerful. Even 7 years down the line, when the experience is further away from me now, I receive a testimonial and it makes me cry, because it's so amazing what people are saying. Like, it's the only group I feel 100% comfortable with going to. I always feel much better after I've been to group. Just knowing it was there gave me the confidence to have another baby. I mean, how amazing is that, to know that? And it's, the passionate people wanting to give support. So it's really important that we don't ever forget what we're here to do. Next steps for us, and this is the last slide, I know I talk for England, so I'll slow down, is responsible growth, which means doing things really steadily and carefully and properly. We have been asked to set up in all different locations, but we're like, hey, calm down. Ruth and I both have other jobs as well, so we're having to do this part-time, which is quite a struggle sometimes. To develop a fundraising strategy. Obviously, we all need that in our lives because money is a reality in order to grow. To roll out our one-to-one home visits, do a bit more partnership work with the good organisations that have values that align with ours, and one day there will be peer support for every single person to access within their local vicinity. And that's certainly our dream within Cheshire East in the next 5 years, to have somewhere that everybody can go to within, you know, a sort of reasonable distance. That's it. Thank you very much. Someone have any questions?
I think